academic hospitals require you to publish in a lot of situations, and so that's why you don't see a lot of deals there, because they haven't had the big research background. That said, I can't say this for sure because I haven't lived the experience, but I suspect that if you're interested in research, it wouldn't be hard to do that even at an osteopathic school, because in the end we're all doctors and we're all trying to improve medicine.
Are you required to, if you go the MD route, are you required to do the research?
No. Very good question. So I'm not, even though I went to an MD school, I'm not particularly research oriented. I definitely don't like the lab. I did it in college because I felt like I had to, and I hated it. I'm not discouraging it. It was just my personal preference. Plus, I squirted something in my eyes, and now I have to wear glasses. So I have personal memory about it. So I knew going in that I wasn't going to do lab bench research. In some schools, you have to do a scholarly project, and that's kind of a mini research project, but it can be a review of the literature, so reading more than your own experiment. It can be looking at data retrospectively, so you take a practice and you ask a question. That's what I did. I was working in a pediatric HIV clinic, and I was trying to see if HIV infection in children seemed to have a higher rate of mental illness associated with it. And so I just looked back at tons of charts and looked at what their immune system status was and how many diagnoses they had. And then obviously it was a retrospective study, it wasn't a control study, so all I could show was an association and not a causation. But that was my research project, and I learned a lot about doing research that's not pipetting and mixing things. But not all schools have this requirement, and I know that for a fact because I know a lot of people who didn't have to do research. But if you are in a place that's affiliated, if you are in a medical school that's affiliated with a big hospital and that is more academic based, then you have a lot of opportunities to do it if you want to.
After you finish medical school, how does the whole residency or how does that work?
That's a good question. So first of all, when I moved from Italy, and in Italy what you do is you finish high school and then you choose kind of what you want to major in, and then one of those things can be medicine, and it's a longer course. It's not 4 years, it's 6 or 7 depending on how long it takes you. So when I moved, my family's bias was, well, if you're gonna do medicine, then you may as well just like cut your college short and like look for programs that are affiliated with a medical program. So I went straight through. My sister, who just started medical school right now, had an older sister who had carved the path for her. So she was able to think a little bit more about how she wanted to take that path. So she actually took 3 years off and did some research, worked, saved some money, and now she just started medical school. Similarly, when you're in medical school, a lot of people do it in 4 years. There's a growing number of people who take extra years during school to do projects, whether it's a research project, getting an extra degree, traveling abroad for a year. There's definitely people who do that. And then they usually do that not at the end of medical school, but rather in the middle. And that's because you kind of want to be in the context of a school with the support network of the school that's offered to you when you're applying for residency. The way residency applications work is, as you can imagine from applying to college, and you need recommendation letters, and you need to put together a resume, and you write a personal statement, and then you apply to various programs. Depending on what you want to do and what your priorities are, people strategize that differently, and I think it's the same for applying to medical school. Some people, if you have a particular preference for a specialty that's hard to get into, then you may want to, and you really want to do that, like orthopedics is pretty hard to get into, Like, if you really want to do orthopedics, then you're more likely to apply kind of everywhere and say, well, if I end up in Wisconsin, whatever. If you're applying for a specialty that's not as hard to get into, like pediatrics, then you may decide to be more selective about geography. And similarly, if you are the kind of person that thinks, oh, I'm going to do research for sure, then you may apply only to big academic programs as opposed to someone who says, I really want to work with the underserved like me, and so you apply to places like Children's Oakland where you get to work with the underserved. I don't think that's very different from medical school. If you really want to go to medical school, but your MCAT is so-so, or your GPA is so-so, but but it's exactly what you want to do and you can't think of doing anything else, that you may want to apply broadly geographically. And if you don't have a particular preference towards research versus not, then you may want to broaden your application to include DO schools to maximize your chances. If you have a really good GPA and really good MCAT scores, you should still apply broadly, because unfortunately it's very competitive to get into medical school these days. But you may be a little more selective about where you're applying, and you may, you will get guidance with this, I'm sure, with you. But there's definitely tiers of schools, and you should definitely dip lower than the tier that you think you qualify for, because you can't, you don't want to apply to, you may have to apply to medical school twice, but it's a pain in the ass. So you want to maximize your chances the first time. With medical school, people will offer you interviews, and then you go in your interview, and then people will offer you a spot, and then you choose the school that you want to go to, and then there's a chance to go and visit these schools afterwards before you get your final choice and meet the students. And I think that's a very important, more important, I would say, than college, because it's usually smaller classes. It kind of feels like adult high school when you go to med school, as far as the social scene, because it's the same 100 to 200 people that you're seeing every day and you have to work with. So it's important to get along with the students as well. Personally, I think that I wouldn't have done very well in Alabama with a bunch of people who hunt and have certain political views. I think my brain would have exploded, so that's why I was definitely looking for like-minded people. For residency, it's a little bit tougher. For residency, you don't really get that independence in the choice. What you do is they offer you interviews, you go to your interview, and then you rank the places based on how much you like them. So, I like Children's Oakland the most, so I'll put it number 1, and I like UCSF second, so I'll put it second, et cetera, et cetera. And then the places actually rank the applicants. I like this one the best, I must have this one, and so on and so forth. And then a computer program with a big giant algorithm matches people, and it's called a match. And actually 3 weeks from now, the current 4th year class of medical students will have this big match ceremony, and it's everywhere, same day, same time around the country. And they get a sealed envelope, and inside that envelope is a contract. And that's why you have to, be careful about where to apply, because if you don't think you'd be okay with being in Alabama, no matter how much you love what you do, then you should not choose Alabama, because if you don't like what's in your contract, then you either are okay with maybe probably not doing residency ever, because when you enter the match, it's kind of an agreement that once you get that contract, you'll go there. Mm-hmm. So if you say, then it's really looked poorly upon, and it's a lot of stuff that people in their 3rd and 4th year of med school worry about. It's not something that you guys should worry about, but it's definitely a little bit more stressful than the application to medical school, because it feels so definite. I thought I was going to stay in the East Coast, and I saw Oakland, and I was so excited because I wanted to come out here, but I was so scared. I was like, So, but it's it.
How long is the residency for?
Good question. So it varies. The shortest residency programs are pediatrics, internal medicine, family medicine, and they are 3 years. They are, the basic general medicine type of specialties. Then there's ones that are a little bit longer. Obstetrics and gynecology is 4 years. Med Peds, which is both internal medicine and pediatrics, is 4 years. Neurology is 4 years. Radiology and radiation oncology are 4 years. And then there's longer ones, so usually the surgical residencies are the longest because it's the way you learn how to do a surgery, is by doing it over and over again, and you can only do it over and over again if you're there doing it for many years. So ENT, so ear, nose, and throat, is 5 years. Erased that slate and went into everything thinking that I could do it. And then I actually thoroughly considered everything, but I kept pediatrics last, so that when I got to pediatrics, I was like, okay, just kidding. The only one that I had a really hard time with was OB-GYN, because I find it very gruesome, very beautiful, but just intense. But that's my personal opinion. It's so cool to deliver babies, I'm sure, but too much for me. I wait for them. That's what I've been doing this past month. I was up the past 30 hours just waiting for babies. So help them. Anyway, sorry.
So what, you just said you were for 30 hours. What do you mean you were for 30 hours, like straight?
Yeah. So that's one thing that kept, okay. So I'm so glad this came up. So this is one thing that I think you have to know going in, because I don't think you can ever resent it, otherwise you will be a very unhappy person. The path to becoming a doctor and the life of a doctor has improved a lot since the 70s and 80s. It used to be that people stayed there for 2 days in a row, 3 days in a row, non-stop. They were the only ones there, no support. Someone finally figured out that it was probably unsafe, and not only for the doctors, but also for the patients. And so more and more laws have been put in place to regulate the number of hours. So now I can work a maximum of 80 hours a week. That's averaged out over the course of 4 weeks. So some weeks I'll work more, and some weeks I'll work less. So then that's the case. Unfortunately, I know I'm looking at you whenever I talk about surgery, because you said you're thinking about it. There are specialties that will say, sure, we'll do that, and then they'll make their residents not tell the truth about how much they work. My best friend's husband is a surgeon, and he works way more than that, and I find it incredibly unsafe and incredibly hard, and that's part of why I couldn't be a surgeon, is I don't have the stamina for it. But some people do, and some people love the surgery aspect so much that that's what gives them the extra energy. But again, you don't have to have your mind made up when you go. You figure things out, and you look at what the people look like, and you figure out whether they're your kind of people or not. Yes?
So you said 80 hours a week, that's how many you do? That's average?
Yeah.
So that's like 24 hours straight, and another 24 hours? Like...
So let me get to that. So the way they've regulated it now, your first year of residency, you cannot stay overnight. You can work a maximum of 16 hours shifts. So what you'll do, what the typical life of an intern who's respecting duty hours is 10 to 12 hours, 10 to 12 hours, 10 to 12 hours, 16 to 17 hours, 12 to 12 hours, 12 hours, 4 days off a month in your intern year. When you get to your second and third year, and again I'm talking about pediatrics because that's what I know, then you start doing overnights. So yesterday I went into work at 7 in the morning, and I came out today around noon, and then I helped a woman who was fainted on the street, which is why I was late. I'm so sorry about that. And then I ran here. That's speed of late. It's hard. Some nights you sleep. So some night I slept. Last night I slept like 4 hours, and it was glorious. Some nights you don't sleep, and it's exhausting. It's really hard. And some days you just want to murder everyone, except for your patients. Just everyone else around you. But then, for me, then you see a patient or you do something really awesome, and then it changes everything. And that's why I'm saying you have to be prepared for it, and you have to expose yourself to it if you can, to the life of a doctor now, because there's other ways of taking care of patients that are not as exhausting. There's nursing and nurse practitioner programs, there's physical therapy programs, etc. I would never discourage you from being a doctor. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm just telling you, like, expose yourself to it. Because the last thing I would want you to do is go through all of this training and then realize that you just resent this so much. It's not, I'm saying it with a smile on my face because in the end when I look back I think everything is worth it. But there's definitely times where like there's a concert I want to go to or a wedding I want to go to or a party I want to go to and I can't. And there's definitely Friday nights like last Friday night where, you know, my fiance was going out, my college friend is visiting and I'm like, man, you don't even know him and you're going out and I'm at work. But then a baby's born that's like 31 weeks and you like literally breathe for them and they're alive because of you and that makes it worth it for me. So you need to decide whether that's how you feel. And I think personally I wish I had had someone tell me this when I was going through it. I think in the end I still would have gone for it, but I wish I had known. And similarly I see a lot of women in the room. You're the only male representation here. They talk about equality, and definitely peer-wise, we are respected now as women in medicine. My opinion is as respected as that of a man amongst colleagues. But there's a lot of other things that are still unequal. I wish I'd brought my badge. We have our badge with our face and our name and MD at the end. And then underneath it, now they make us carry this big thing that says doctor because people in the emergency room are complaining that, God, I haven't seen a doctor in 3 hours. I've been here for 3 hours and I haven't seen a doctor. And you're there telling them, like, you've seen me 3 times. Like, I know I'm a woman, I'm not your nurse. And you'll be called nurse a lot. And I think different attitudes are perceived differently between men and women. If you speak your mind and you're a man, you're assertive. If you speak your mind and you're a woman, you're cocky or overconfident. You know, there's definitely, even though it's becoming more equal, there's definitely gender issues and you have to be prepared for that. Similarly, you know, as far as life planning, you have to be ready for that too. I am getting married in July and I want babies. I have baby fever. I see them, I want them, I hold them. I'm like the only doctor who changes diapers. It's absurd. But I have to wait because it's part of the planning. And again, you want to be ready for all that because you don't want to resent it. And there will be times when you're holding someone else's beautiful baby and you're like, but most of the time I don't resent it because I know it's part of the plan and that my job gives me such incredible joy that it's worth the other adjustments.
So later on, are your hours more flexible? Like when the reason
Yeah.
I ask is I have 2 kids.
Yeah.
2 babies. So.
Yeah. So first of all, I say that I'm waiting because I can't, but there's a woman in my program who has 2 10, now 11-year-old twin daughters, and she had them at the end of college, and she waited to go to medical school, and she does fine. I admire her because I think she's amazing, but yes, the hours can get better, and that's the other thing. So just like there's flexibility in the specialty you choose, the flexibility comes from your priorities. There are people who are truly married to their job. There's this obstetrician in Alta Bates. I'm just learning this because it's my first month there, and she works so much that the hospital gave her an apartment inside the hospital because she's there so much. That's someone who's married to her job, and she's happy for that. Similarly, there's doctors who choose intensive care medicine, surgeons who are cardiothoracic surgeons or neurosurgeons, and you know, hospitals don't have more than 1 or 2 of those, so they're on call all the time. The neurosurgeon at Children's Hospital does 36-hour surgeries and loves it. You can choose to do that, but then you have to realize that that may not be the most family-friendly choice. On the other hand, if you, like me, want both, then there's ways to do that, and there's definitely ways to prioritize things in your life, and medicine is not the profession that does not allow for a family, but it's definitely not the most family-friendly profession. And there will definitely be times when you're on call and where you're FaceTiming your kids and you miss them. there may be missed birthdays and missed, there definitely will be missed school plays and games and whatever the school meeting, the board meetings are. But it's a balance, and it depends on, you have to, that's, if I can give you one piece of advice is, before you embark in this hard, expensive, incredibly gratifying journey, have a talk with yourself about what your priorities are, and then make some sort of master plan about it. There's definitely people who do both. There's intensive care unit female doctors who have kids and do it and make it work. There's female surgeons who do it. There's female orthopedic surgeons who do it. There are examples of those, and I admire them very much. And in this room, there may be the future of those people, you know, who can do it all. And I think you need to look inside and throughout, not just now, but throughout the process, and just make sure you bite as much as you can chew and you feel comfortable, because otherwise there's potential to burn out.
Do you just like take naps at work, or like? I know I've been down to like the basement where the doctors, there's rooms where they can sleep. So do you like go down there?
So we have call rooms, and if there is a chance to sleep, absolutely, you can find us there. So sometimes you can take naps, sometimes you can't. I think there's also, unfortunately, kind of the expectation, because you're still in training, that you're going to be up until your boss decides it's time to go to sleep, and then it's okay to go to sleep. There's people who, say, whatever, I'm not doing anything, I'm going to take a nap, and I think that's a smarter way to go. I think I'm just a little too shy, and I'm like, oh, I guess I'm late. But you can take naps, and the majority of the time you get to have at least 1 or 2 hours of sleep during these long shifts. You get married to coffee, and 2 little slaps on your cheeks. But I think part of it is also, and then the next day after you've worked a 30-hour shift, you get the rest of the day to sleep. So you can kind of catch up. But I'm not trying to lie to you. I'm tired a lot.
Are you going to sleep after this?
Yes, probably.
So you said it's 3 years for pediatrics. What year are you?
I'm in my second year, so more than halfway through.
So do you get paid during residency?
Yes, not a ton, but you get a good salary.
You mind sharing?
No, it's okay. So programs, most pediatric programs in the area give you around $50,000 a year before taxes, and then it goes up every year. So around 55 the second year, around 60 the third year. Some programs pay more, some programs pay less. County programs pay less usually, but it really depends on the hospital, and that's definitely something that people ask when they're, maybe not directly, but they look at the papers to see. I think that's the other thing. It's definitely a financial commitment to become a doctor. There's loans that have to be repaid, and there's a lot of help to repay them. There's programs that can forgive your debt after 10 years if you work in underserved areas. There's programs where I'm not going to say, my personal bias is against, I'm a pro-peace kind of person, so I wouldn't do the Army program because I would be too scared to get deployed.
No, tell them. Go to the next room.
Really?
Yeah.
But they pay for it. They pay for it. You're just, you owe them. Yeah, you owe them 4 years of your life, and the majority of the time you're not deployed, but still they could say, oh, you want to be an ENT? Well, right now we don't really need an ENT, so, or, oh, you want to go to this residency? Well, we kind of need you in Alabama, and sorry. So you don't have quite as much flexibility when you do an Army program. Similarly, if you do the National Health Corps or whatever it's called, it's 2 years for every year of medical school that they pay for. So again, you owe them a lot of life. But it's doable. at the same time, there's other ways to pay the loans back, and it's tight because, especially if you live around here, and it's very expensive to live around here. But it can work. So there is loan deferral programs if you're still in residency and you feel like it's just too much. I see that a lot in people who have kids and a family to support, and they're working on supporting their family, and it's too much to also repay the loans, and so they defer them until they make real money.